Hello. So today I'm working on this sci-fi concept. I just kind of had the idea pop into my head for the design and just decided to go for it. So I thought I'd just be telling you a little bit of my process. As you can see, I'm kind of already through it, but the beginning I spend quite a bit of time just blocking things out to think about the composition and kind of just the shape language and how I want things to flow. Spending a lot of time with the bigger objects to kind of make sense of the scene. The beginning, I was kind of going back and forth on where to have the weight, and I ended up really liking kind of the space ships above. I think it kind of gives a good sense of weightlessness, which is what I want for something that's supposed to be in space. I also like to start just with those midtones. I've been looking at a lot of Caravaggio lately and been really inspired by just his sense of like the light and dark that he uses. So that was definitely in my mind a lot. So trying to keep most of the scene in shadow and just having a few highlights, and you can kind of see as I go later on that I lose track about that a little bit and have to come back to it. But right now I'm just getting in there trying to figure out. I go from these kind of bigger shapes to specifying them, and to begin with I'm not really too worried about their function or even what they are. I'm just thinking about, does this form look nice? And then after that I start to go in and specify maybe some of what those things actually are. Um, and try to think through what this thing would be used for if I lived in this world, how I would use this object essentially. So right here is kind of started out as a thruster idea, and then I was like, maybe it'll be some sort of like force field. And then yeah, just working on the top a little bit, trying out some different shapes. I really like how this little booster turned out. For this claw, I was envisioning that it would be able to retract. It would slide in and out, and those little doors could open and close. For the original concept, I was kind of envisioning this idea, maybe a game or a movie where this person is just living in like low orbit and harvesting just trash from satellites, or just something in the future where there's so much garbage in our orbit that people are just living there as scrap collectors or something. Yeah, as you can see, I try to hold off on the details until that bigger shape is figured out. So I'm starting to go back in and kind of articulate things a little bit more clearly. Just a slow process. I like to really work around, just because there's so much of it that is about the object's relationships to each other, like the value, the shape. And as you kind of change things nearby, it impacts everything. So I like to do a lot of back and forth, kind of just working all over. Yeah, as you can see. So for the main character, actually, I didn't film this. I went and did some line work. You probably saw it pop up. But just kind of figured out more specifically what the character was wearing, and like kind of their outfit and what they would use before I was going to come and do it in full value, just to make it a little simpler, so I wasn't trying to figure out what all of the objects were on them in value first. So yeah, I did that with some just gesture. You saw it right there. Yeah, some line work first, kind of playing out the costume, I guess. Coming from traditional medium, I can't zoom in this intensely. There's my reference face floating in space. But yeah, I've noticed it's really easy to just zoom in and pump way more detail into something than it actually needs. And since you can't do that in real life, I'm really not used to it. And yeah, a lot of that detail ends up just being not looking quite right when you're just so zoomed in, and you need to, the same thing, keep it in context. And when you're that zoomed in, you're not in the context of the whole composition, and then what looks good in that moment might start to look a little weird once you're zoomed back out. Yeah, so you need to be careful with that zoom. Yeah, so, you know, continuing to work in some of those details. For whatever reason, when I'm drawing figure, shoes come to me really quickly. So I always end up really enjoying the shoes that I draw. I don't really know why that is. Yeah, and now you can see here that I start to go back in and readjust some of those values, because I was realizing that I was starting to lose a sense of that bigger value structure. And yeah, that's kind of how it works. Like, it's real easy with the zoom to lose a sense of the bigger thing that's happening. So I was really trying to go back in and rearrange that value. So here I've taken it over to Photoshop and started to just, it's a little easier. I have a little tablet that I draw on, so it's a little easier to get a little more detail, but most of it I can do on my little tablet. I don't normally like doing photo bashing, but just for some things I think it's a little easier. Well, definitely a lot easier for textures, but I try to just challenge myself to paint everything. I don't know if that's really good, but I guess it's just something I want to challenge myself to do, is try to paint it all. Some of it can get really frustrating though, so I wasn't going to spend time trying to just paint the earth all the way. And yeah, this hose was giving me some trouble to get the value looking right on it, that's for sure. Spent a lot of time, and those little claw hands too, I did a couple of iterations and never really got something I loved. But you know, not everything has to be perfect, just trying to keep it moving. I really like that little bit of, I imagine him having a headlamp and some light coming off that. I think that adds a lot to make it more dynamic. I really like finding those little places where you can add a kind of another light source. I think it starts to make it a lot more interesting. And same kind of goes for the thruster thing on the other side. There's a good opportunity for a lot of ambient light. Yeah, and as I kind of went and added value to everything, toned it back down, made it all a little darker, started to lose a little bit of the specificity, so I'm coming back in to give a little bit more of that back. That toolbox, just plopped it in at the beginning and didn't think about it for a while, and now it's time to kind of figure out where it belongs and what it should look like. I don't know if that really did that much to add to the scene, but felt like it needed a little something more. Imagine this kind of like Bluetooth toolbox that just follows you around and has some little thrusters that it can boost itself with. Another thing that I didn't really want to go and fully articulate was all the garbage in the background. So I got some just images and from like a scrap metal heap, because I was imagining it'd be all that trash floating around. So just to get me started, and then kind of go back in and articulate some of the surfaces to unify it a little bit, because otherwise it just is a little bit too much kind of noise. Yeah, I was realizing I start to like to lay down a color to kind of get a sense of what it's going to be like with a color. I really went bright with the earth to start with and ended up toning it back down later. Yeah, as you can see, the purple, it's the color when I try to do it over the top, it's kind of a bit of a clown show to start with. It's just way too saturated, so it takes some adjusting, and I end up playing around with it for quite a bit, and the changes are kind of get a little bit subtle, but yeah, I've spent a lot of time painting in real life with color, and I love color, and I have to be honest, like I haven't really figured out how to translate it to Photoshop in the same way. And I think maybe one of the things I just need to do is paint with color from the beginning. I don't know, I guess I just decided to do black and white. It's a little easier to get the value right, but I think I need to just paint with color the whole way instead of just doing color blending layers and then doing a little bit of just finishing and adding highlights, because it just doesn't have the same depth of color. So here's the end product. I ended up changing the orientation. I hope that you enjoy, and yeah, I think I like how it turned out in the end. It was definitely a struggle for a little bit though.